part of the ATO Cybersecurity Awareness Month. We are going to discuss how to build and maintain resilient critical infrastructure. My name is Mariana Pejcheva. I am part of the ATOS group, and today I will be your host. In terms of housekeeping, we are going to answer all of your questions in the end of the session. Feel free to type them in the chat box. Let me introduce the speakers today. Antoine Dausi from Fortinet, head of the OT practice, Matan Dobrushin, VP Research of Otorio, and last but not least, Jos Vergis, head of SOC Global Delivery Center in Atos. Let's start with the questions. Matan, my first question is for you. How do you see the OT threat landscape evolving for the key industries making use of ICS?
Okay, hi everyone. So I think that if we look at the past year, we had an interesting one. It all started like a year ago, I think in April, where we saw a lot of nation state attacks like the In Controller and the Industry 2 incident, which are probably also connected to the geopolitical situation within Russia and Ukraine. And also, we had some OT ransomware that we see every now and then. And finally, we see a lot of hacktivists attacks in the past few months. And they all focused in one way or another on ICS. And if we look at all of these attacks, it really sums up all the different possibilities for threat actors on that space. Obviously, there are different motivations and different resources for each of the groups, but it is clear that the trend is use ICS security advisories in order to create some kind of damage, either for real physical damage, like the In Controller tried to do, or for money, as the ransomware groups, or for reputation and just creating a lot of buzz around the attacks, like the hacktivists. And this trend of using ICS related security exploitations is really concerning because it is really within hand for attackers today to use these tools. In many cases, it's really not hard to mitigate those threats, just doing the basic things one after another with the right technologies in order to mitigate the threats. But we are just seeing that a lot of organizations are just not ready and not taking the basic steps in order to mitigate those. And I'm sure that as soon as we'll see more and more security products and practices being embedded within industrial organizations, we are going to hear about much more attacks that are occurring, because I don't think all the attacks that were published this year is really the tip of the iceberg. I'm sure that once we'll have real monitoring within those environments, we are going to hear much more about them. So I think this is it.
Yeah, thank you very much. And there is an acceleration of owners and operators of critical infrastructure converging their IT and the operational technology, OT networks, departments, and systems. So, are you seeing such convergence with your customers, and how? Maybe, Joes, what would you say?
Hello everyone. Thanks, Mariana, for the question. So historically, the IT and the OT systems have been managed separately. So when I say OT, whether it is OT or industrial IoT or ICS systems, they have been managed independently, by separate teams. And in many organizations, OT has been designed to do specific tasks. Whether it is the power grid or it is the nuclear reactors, they have been deployed deep inside, air gapped from the IT systems and the internet. So there was no real risk of cyber attack. And we see that most of the OT systems are very sensitive systems, whether it is nuclear reactors in Iran or the power grid in Ukraine. They perform mission critical functions. And in the recent past, we are seeing a huge convergence of the IT and the OT IoT systems. And there are clear benefits of doing this, because now an OT or IoT system consists of thousands of sensors which are deployed in a factory floor or in a power grid system, which collects a lot of data. And we need to exchange that data with the front office system, with the enterprise planning system, so that if you are able to integrate and exchange information between the IT and OT systems, there are a lot of tangible advantages. There is better supply chain management, there is better utilization of enterprise resources, there is better end-to-end automation, and of course, better regulatory compliance. So the business benefits of IT and OT convergence are immense. So that is the way forward, and that is already happening. The downside is, with the convergence of IT and OT systems, the attack surface has increased. The OT systems, which were really untouchable or away from the internet, far inside the networks, have now become accessible because they are interconnected with IT systems, and IT systems are possibly exposed to the internet. So going forward, we already see a lot of the customers are doing this convergence, and that is an irreversible thing. More and more customers will come where this convergence is happening much faster. But we need to keep in mind that this convergence opens up a large amount of cybersecurity risk, and we need to mitigate that to make sure that this convergence does not impact the security posture of the customers.
Mhm. Yeah, true. Thank you very much. So, Antoine, what about the regulatory compliance, like this directive? Are they influencing and helping the awareness in order to mitigate the cyber risk in the OT ICS space?
Thank you, Mariana, and hi everyone. So, yes, OT regulatory frameworks such as the NIS directive, now in its NIS 2 version, they are playing a very important role for OT asset owners, be them critical infrastructures or not. Depending on the asset owner sub-industry, there will be different standards and best practices recommendation that will apply. The key one are very famous. It's IEC 62443, NIST, ISO 27K, NERC CIP, and there are a few others. For critical infrastructures such as utilities, these standards and best practices are getting more and more enforced by the country competent authorities. In fact, administrative fines can go up to 10 million or 2% of the entity global turnover, whatever the greatest or the biggest is. For non-critical infrastructure, such as big enterprise manufacturer, on their side, they are pushed more and more by auditors and insurers to comply as well. In fact, auditors will use compliant framework to ensure security requirements are met. The checklist they will use will map to the standard that I just named before. In fact, security standards and best practices, they just map to each other. But whatever the standard or best practice asset owners will choose or be required to follow, the same big five family of controls will apply to any OT cybersecurity program enforced by NIS directive. It is asset management, access control, network segmentation, logging and monitoring, and risk management. And I would add backup and restore as it is in the NIST CSF framework. All these pillars, they are necessary to achieve a good defense in depth, both on the IT and OT side of the house. And there is another very important pillar brought by NIS 2, and it is the crisis organization network called EU Cyclone. It basically supports the threat intelligence and incident response collaboration between SOC teams of asset owners and their country CSIRTs. So this is to basically increase information sharing, such as vulnerability disclosure between the big asset owners and member states at all across Europe. But let's be clear, compliance to regulation does not mean an asset owner is secured. Let's just take it as it is. It is just an exam. And having an engineer with a diploma does not mean that he will be a good engineer. But you do not want to have an engineer without a diploma.
Yeah, that's true. But let me ask you a follow-up question, actually, Antoine. So, how about the rise of the IoT and 5G technologies? Do you see this rise as disturbing the OT, and how can the asset owners actually benefit from the technology without increasing the risk?
Yeah, that is an important question, Mariana, and I would take a Purdue angle to it. So the Purdue reference model for enterprise, or PERA model for ICS, is the starting point to represent and secure industrial control systems. This model has been foundational to define the IEC 62443 standard that will specify the zones and conduits or segmentation strategy that is necessary to secure a critical infrastructure. Now, this Purdue model is evolving with this explosion of IoT and wireless devices, be them 5G or not. These can be positioned in the business zone on the IT side or on the OT side of the house within the ICS secure perimeter, which is, just like Joe mentioned, the crown jewels of any production environment. So it is critical to take this into account for our solution architects, because these devices, they are disrupting the traditional IC representation of zones and conduits. In fact, you can have an IIoT device that can connect directly to the cloud, or a 5G one that will connect to a mobile private network backbone. But at the same time, they connect to your physical process at several layers of the Purdue model. So we need to find new ways to secure, meaning identify, profile, segment, even better microsegments these devices, because you do not want to have on the same network, without critical control, a smart sensor with an IoT or a 5G vulnerability and a controller that is running your critical processes. There will be other critical control that will be necessary on top of segmentation, such as role-based access control, even better, zero trust, as well as virtual patching against the known vulnerability, because these devices are difficult to patch. And the latter can be achieved with up-to-date IPS engines, for example. Yes.
Yeah, listening to all of you, I made the conclusion that it's quite important actually to choose the best partners when it's about cybersecurity in that field. So, Joes, what are the key criteria when selecting a cybersecurity partner, whether it's a system integrator, MSSP, or cybersecurity vendor? Why it is critical for the asset owners to choose the strong ecosystem?
Yeah, hi, Mariana. So, as we discussed, if you look at the past, the two streams of IT and OT systems have been managed independently, and this is applicable even for the cybersecurity solutions, processes, and governance. But now, with the convergence of IT and OT, happening at a rapid pace, it is important that as an enterprise, I don't act in silos. It is very important that there is an unified approach across IT and OT, not just in the products, but also in policies, procedures, and governance. So an enterprise should look at unifying the cybersecurity approach for in the new converged IT OT setup.
Mhm, mhm. Okay,
Now,
thank you very much. Please go ahead.
in an ideal world, it is good if we have solutions which work seamlessly across both IT and OT. that may not be present today, but at least when we are choosing the products which work, we need to look at products which will at a minimum collaborate, and coexist, and cooperate with, across the IT and the OT world. And it is also important that enterprises engage with service providers who have the capacity to deliver the end-to-end security services. Like Antoine said, the security services will range from doing a risk assessment and enterprise security design to monitoring and implementing solutions, to detecting attacks, and also to respond to them. So it is important to work with enterprises who have in-depth experience in the IT and OT world, and also the breadth of services across the different phases of the cybersecurity cycle, starting from design all the way to incident response and mitigation. So customers should look at the IT and OT asset owners, and enterprises should look at engaging with service providers who are able to provide them a unified approach in terms of product solutions governance, and also has the depth of experience in IT and OT and the breadth of cybersecurity services. That would make it easier to go through this journey of IT OT convergence, with a seamless approach.
Yeah. Thank you, Jos. So, Antoine, what will be required for such an ecosystem to work efficiently? What would you say?
Yeah, sure, Mariana. I mean, as usual, it will be down to a very strong collaboration between the ecosystem teams. So when we talk about cybersecurity cross vendors collaboration, such as Otoyo with Fortinet, it is mostly technical teams collaboration to have good API integration. But it does not end here. We also need to have, for example, useful solution brief that will describe the use case for the asset owner management. It is having detailed deployment guides and processes for the field engineers to securely implement our solution. And it is having integration demos and POCs to prove that the tech integration is efficient and adapted to the customer environment. And finally, very important in OT, it is having solid reference in a similar environment, because availability, as we know, is king in OT. And when we talk system integrators or MSSP with cybersecurity vendor collaboration, such as Atos with Fortinet and or Otoyo, it is about tech enablement and support. For example, at Fortinet, we spend a lot of time training our GSI partners, such as Atos, and we provide services support on our technology. And Atos will be able to leverage these services to support the life cycle of the solution that will be implemented at an asset owner. And Otoyo will do just the same. So it is of great value for an asset owner to have a GSI such as Atos that can choose the right leading edge OT technology, such as the one we mentioned, and then integrate these and support the asset owner convergence that Joe mentioned, because those comes with many different security requirements.
Yeah. Thank you, Antoine. So, Matan, can you give us a few examples of fruitful collaboration in OT?
Yeah, sure. So it is very much related to what Antoine just said. So when we are trying to protect an OT network or an ICS system, we have a lot of different challenges and angles for it. Like Joe said about the convergence and new technologies, and we have a lot of different stakeholders within a network. Like we have the security team and the network team and the OT teams, and each one of them has different needs, different requirements, and different mindset also. And it kind of resembles to also like partnerships like ours with Fortinet and Atos, that each one needs to give his own angle to the story, right? And it is always a game of two. It's a game of the technological integration, like Antoine said, about the APIs and what each system benefits from the other and how well we are communicating with one another. The second part is really, you can call it defense in depth, but what each layer of value each partner gives on top of the other, and how we work together in order to solve this complex challenge of securing ICS networks. So a few examples of those is that Atos, as an example, they know safe digitalization for a lot of years, and they have a lot of experience in how the SCADA system works and what are the bits and bytes of the OT for a lot of years. And we, as Otorio, can ingest the operational data and try to work with the Atos team in order to understand really what's more important, what's more critical for that specific process. And then we're communicating back to all of Fortinet's portfolio, and we're helping configuring them or sending them our own context in order to see the full picture. And we work in some kind of harmony, one on top of another. So this is just one example, but the general point here is that in most cases, in these complex IT, OT converged environments, you don't have one magic script or tool that will just, everyone will like and it will work out of, without any integrations and without problems and without anything. We really need expertise from different angles in order to make it not only work, but also to be as part of the workflow of the customer. If he doesn't know how to operate it within his restrictions and the workflows, it will just don't do any good. That's it.
Thank you very much. We still have like 7 minutes before starting with the questions and the answers. So maybe the three of you can use that time and give us some final recommendation, and especially for the asset owners, how to build and maintain resilient critical infrastructure. So Matan, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. So again, as also I think Antoine touched the term risk management, and I think risk management is really the big challenge here because everyone already understands that you cannot be fully protected all of your life, and you always want to do some kind of digitalization or take some risks in order to be more efficient, more productive, more so on. And whenever we use a security system, we have a lot of alerts and a lot of scary, algorithms and scores that a lot of times we don't know where we should focus. What are the most critical things that we should do first? And today we have obviously calculations that everyone agrees on, like the CVSS for vulnerabilities, and we have others as well. But we need to make sure that these vulnerabilities and alerts are come into in context and not just a score that we need. Like if we have a vulnerability that it's CVSS 10, maybe it is very critical to your environment, but it is not a must. And you need to make sure that the teams or the security vendor or partner that you are working with really understands how this vulnerability affects you, either in an automatic or manual way. And maybe changing some default passwords in your network will impact the security level 10 times more faster rather than go and patching devices and something like that. So I think that besides assessing what are the security issues that I have in the network, I really need expertise from in-house or outside to help me prioritize what are the more impactful mitigations that I need to take in order to have a good start.
Thank you. Jos, what will be your final recommendation?
Yes, one thing I would like to highlight is some of the learnings that we have had in the cyber world in IT are equally applicable to the OT environment. We need to focus on all the three areas: protection, detection, and response. And in protection, the similar things which Anton highlighted: network level segregation, authentication, not just people but of machines as well, encryption, network level attack prevention using IPS, etc., is very relevant for OT. For the detection side, it is important to have a 24 by 7 threat detection and mitigation, a continuous vulnerability detection, what vulnerabilities are coming up on the OT systems, and trying to mitigate that before an attack can happen. And also collating threat intelligence. What are the attacks? What are the threat actors who are targeting the systems, and sharing that learning with everybody? That is on the detection. The last phase being a response. We need to have automated responses wherever it is possible. Of course, OT systems are very critical, so we need to exercise caution. But wherever an automated mitigation of an attack is possible, we should explore that. We should have standard SOPs for responding to cyber threats in an OT environment. And we should definitely have breach readiness. In case a breach happens, how quickly can I engage with my partners who can help me with that? And are those partners already aware about my environment so that they can take quick action? So I feel the all the three layers: protection, detection, and response is very much applicable to OT, and we should enterprises should adopt the learnings that we have in the IT world into the OT, into the converged OT IT environment as well.
Thank you very much, Joe. So 2 minutes more, Antoine. Maybe you can summarize your view as well.
Sure, Mariana. So the question was, how can asset owner build and maintain resilient critical infrastructure? And I would say, first of all, by investing in OT cybersecurity people, process, and technology. But we want to do that efficiently, and specifically in OT, just like Matan mentioned, you want to reduce complexity. Complexity is extremely high in OT. ICS systems are very complex. They are systems of systems. So is cybersecurity. So there is a huge burden on OT resources that are looking after security. And you also want to focus on safety, availability, interoperability, long life cycle. Those are also very specific in OT. So I would say solution providers and integrators need to enable simple program, long life cycle, integration, and orchestration. And this would be my recommendation for our asset owners.
Yeah. Thank you very much. That was a great discussion. So maybe we can start with the questions. Actually, I see that we have a question from uh, a viewer of ours. So, in your opinion, what roles, profiles should be part of OTSOC and Blue Teams if it differs somehow from the ITSOC? So, Jos, maybe you can take that question.
Sure, Mariana. Yeah, that's a good question. The objective of the OT SOC also, is very similar to that of an IT SOC. Detect and respond fast before an incident can become a breach. The roles that we have in an IT SOC from a role point of view, we'll come to the skills later. The roles would be very similar. We would need people who are having the 24 by 7 eyes on the glass to see what is going on, what alarms are triggering, which of those alarms are really critical. have the ability to investigate those alerts, provide context to what does this alert mean, from which device has it come, is it really in the context of this customer's environment and the tools and the way they operate, is it really a potential incident, and then being able to communicate that to the shop floor or factory floor or the people who manage the power grid, and help them understand and take the mitigation action. So the roles of monitoring, investigating, notifying, and helping to remediate, those four functions would remain similar in an OT SOC. The skill sets required, the tools that we might need to use will vary depending on the environment, whether it is, what type of OT environment are we monitoring? Is it a system of connected cars, or is it manufacturing system, or is it a nuclear power reactor? So the skill levels required are vary. Of course, with the arrival of products like Otorio and Fortinet, there is a lot of demystification of the complexity of the OT environment, so that an analyst who basically understands the cybersecurity threats and has a basic understanding of the OT systems can interpret to a great extent whether this alarm is serious enough to be acted upon or not. So the roles are similar. The skill set will have to be slightly tweaked to be able to understand it. The product vendors and solution providers are doing a great job of trying to demystify the complexities of each environment, so that more people, more generic profiles in SOC can understand and be able to react to that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Jos, for that answer. So while we are waiting for more questions coming from the audience, maybe Antoine, may I ask you? You mentioned several times defense in depth. What does it mean in OT?
Sure, Mariana. So it's a little bit like a Swiss cheese. We do it by reducing the surface of vulnerability, adding layers of security. So what does that mean in OT? So first, you want to have a built-in security for your control platform. Are your controller running trusted OS and secured application? And this is, I would say, really the control vendor's job. Then it is about process communication security with the right level of encryption and authentication. And what do we do if we do not have this? Because asset owners, they have old install base of ICS that are very often insecure by design. Then are we segmenting the network to contain north-south and lateral traffic within the network and avoid a compromised device that would infect the entire process? So limiting the broadcasting domain with least privilege is really a critical best practice. Then what about system integrity? Is the system properly hardened? Do we have role-based access control and two-factor authentication? We need to have our AV signatures up to date and our system properly patched. And by the way, patching is extremely complicated in OT. So how can we protect before patching our deployments? I gave an hint before with virtual patching with good IPS engine. And last but not least, do we have a good organizational security? Meaning, do we have a cybersecurity framework in place? Are we compliant to regulation? And how do we manage incidents within our SOC? And Joe answered that. In your SOC, you really want to have analysts that understand the OT environment, that are able to read the logs that will come from your PLC. Those are different logs than the IT ones. So those would be the keystone of a good OT defense in depth.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for that great discussion. It was a pleasure for me. So, any other final words from you, Matan?
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting year after all the efforts that organizations and also the the DHS and CISA put in the last few months. So it's going to be interesting in the OT security area.
Definitely. Antoine?
It was a great discussion, and as we said, I mean, the securing critical infrastructure cannot be done by one individual or one company. It's really an ecosystem effort, and it's really critical to work well together. So I'm really glad to have had this discussion with Matan and Joe.
Thank you, Jos.
Yes, Marianne. So I think the IT OT convergence is here to stay, and the attackers are already ahead of us. We are seeing all kind of breaches happening. So as a security community, we need to step up and implement the learnings that we have from the IT world to start with. The regulations and the technologies will definitely catch up, but definitely we have our work cut out to stay one step ahead of the attackers in this. And all the best to all of us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks to everyone who is with us today live and people who are watching us. So don't miss our next LinkedIn Live events. Thank you once again. Speak soon. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.